Welcome back. Once again, we have a regular on the show, Cindy Gatton. My favorite segment is to talk about patient advocacy because that's what I'm all about, transparency and discussing your health, your money, and your choices. So, glad to have you back on the show, Cindy.
As always, it's great to be here, Dr. Gallups.
You've become a regular, and I like that. This segment is about educating people by giving them examples of healthcare consumerism that helps them know that they're not alone, because we're all going to be more responsible for paying out of pocket. And truly, we've all been paying out of pocket for a long time, but everybody thinks that they're an isolated incident. And I love this segment because we get to talk about specific examples of patients that you work with as a patient advocate. So let's talk about one of your clients that you advocate for in addressing their medical bills. You have a client, Joann, who's 53 years old and has a complicated medical history. Tell us her story.
She does have a complicated medical history. You know, she learned a couple of years ago that she has hepatitis. And this is a condition which the CDC is now suggesting that all baby boomers should be screened for. There's
I agree.
some suggestion that there may be an epidemic of hepatitis C in the future.
And it's a, kind of silent killer. In fact, we used to not even call it hepatitis C. It was not hepatitis A, which you can get from eating, say, oysters, or hepatitis B that you get through blood products and all. It was none A, none B. So hepatitis C became fairly rampant, and people don't know that they have it.
Exactly. And when it was discovered that she did have it, she also is a patient with Crohn's disease, which makes the treatment for hepatitis C particularly difficult to tolerate. And to further complicate things, she had sustained some pretty serious injuries related to work many years before, and she also was suffering from chronic pain. So she had a lot of stuff on her plate when she would go in to see her doctors, I should say, because she had multiple different physicians caring for her. She was really frustrated because she didn't feel that her doctors really understood all the things that she was dealing with. And she contacted me because she had recently relocated. She was going to have an opportunity to start fresh with new doctors and wanted to make sure that she was going to have a more effective relationship with them than she had had previously. So we researched, we found some physicians for her, but in the course of her telling me her story, I discovered that as patients, the things that are important to us aren't always the same things that are important to a physician.
It is about communication, and the best physicians are those that communicate.
It really is. You know, as you had shared with your listeners some time back, I am a speech pathologist by training, even though I've not practiced for a very long time. But
Right.
One of the things I learned in my training is that in order to be fluent in another language, you need a vocabulary of about 20,000 words. For a physician to complete medical school, they learn approximately 40,000 new words, the equivalent of 2 foreign languages.
Well, it is a foreign language, isn't it?
It is indeed. And the
Medical
reason
terms.
that's important to us as patients is because doctors speak our language, but they also have these 2 other languages that they're speaking in. And so when we're telling our story, they're really translating. And that means that for us to be effective patients, we really have to get very good at telling our story. And what I discovered with Joann is that, and this is a little bit the pot calling the kettle black because I do this too.
Sure.
We start the story and then we go off in another direction. And then we remember something else that was important about that, and then we go over here. And then we go over there. And as listeners, as our physician is a listener, it gets really hard to figure out what they're supposed to be listening to.
Right. Well, her dilemma was a different one than you normally pursue, because normally you're being reactive to medical bills and helping people understand it. You, with her, have the opportunity or had the opportunity to be proactive in searching for physicians that would treat her problems. How did that go?
Well, we did a couple of things. We sat down and talked about how to tell her story. And we also realized that two things. One, that she didn't have a good medical record herself of the treatments that she'd had previously. We realized that she didn't have a good timeline.
Wow,
Of
and
what
that's
all had
so
happened to her.
important.
It
right?
really is. And so we built both those out. We built her medical
That is
record.
a great idea.
It is. We built her medical record, and then we built a timeline so that she had something in front of her when she sat down with the doctor so that it would make her story flow in a way that fostered that communication.
And I got to tell you, as a physician, I love that. And most physicians love that. They want that because they don't have to ask the question. As I'm told often, read a little, learn a lot. So if you can read it, it's much better. Once again, we're with Cindy Gatton, a patient advocate. So the process took you through the whole history in developing this for her. Then how did it go?
This is a case where, unlike some of the financial issues that we have in healthcare, the results are a little bit more subjective. But Joann reported to me that maybe for the first time in her life, she felt heard by her physicians. We also worked really hard to make sure that records were being exchanged between all of her specialists, so everyone knew what kind of care she was getting and that she knew what her care was and what worked for her. I'm happy to report that she is using one of the new treatments for hepatitis C, which she's
Great.
able to tolerate. She's on medication for her Crohn's disease that's working and really doing well, all things
That's
considered.
great. That's great. That's a great example for all our listeners. Be prepared when you go to the physician because that makes it more efficient for you, for them, and may actually save you money. Because you are having to be your own best advocate. Healthcare now is consumer driven. It's your health, your money, and your choice. So being prepared when you go and see the doc is much better. Let's talk about her financial obligations because that's a large part about what this segment is about. Did you know up front what it was going to cost?
In terms of her medical care, no. But making the investment in having someone help her was really important to her because she had been spending a lot of money. She'd seen a lot of doctors and didn't feel like she was getting what she needed to optimize her health. So it fundamentally, it was really important. And certainly evaluating what coverage she had, looking at doctors that were in network and helping her navigate the financial aspects of that system were really important as well.
Well, that was one of my next questions about what you did to prepare her for her visit. So did you do the research for her regarding physicians being on the panel?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you called and confirmed with their offices that they're on the panel?
That's right. And we looked at what her personal financial obligation was going to be relative to her deductible,
Right.
so that she understood this. This was actually taking place at the beginning of the calendar year when we all are putting out
perfect
those
time.
out-of-pocket dollars. Yeah.
We found that a little over 65% of all people traditionally have changed insurance products, if you will, or renewed in January, and about a third or later times. So January is a big time for that. And what was her deductible, do you recall?
Her deductible was $1,000, which, of course, now is not so very much, but for her
Right.
it was a lot.
Sure. And being with an in-network physician was important. Did you inquire about any ancillaries that were going to be provided? Were they also in-network?
That was an area which I have begun to explore a lot more in depth because sometimes it's harder to determine whether those ancillaries are in network or not. In her case, we were very fortunate. The labs and the other work, the hospitals and all of that were all coordinated and in network for her. But that's not always the case.
Well, not everybody knows to check into that. They may say, well, I'll check with the insurance website to make sure my doctor is. Okay, I'll check with the hospital and make sure. And if they send me for an x-ray study, CT scan, an MRI, I can check with that facility. But when it comes to drawing labs and whatnot, in fact, another show, I hope to get into that subject matter because there's so many hidden expenses that you may not be aware are not covered by your insurance or that provider of that service is not covered. So we need a lot more transparency. So New business for patient advocates now is being proactive, not reactive. How many clients do you take on this position of proactive management for them?
This is really pretty rare. I hope in the future it becomes less rare, that as we think about the kinds of professional support that we may need to navigate life's adventures, that a patient advocate may very well be part of the team that we put together. I would say that in my practice, probably 95% of the calls that I get are when the house is already burning.
It's always, in the past, they have bills and they need you to help them with them.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to our listeners about retaining somebody such as yourself for this service? Why would they need to think about this? Why would they need to engage you for your services?
Back to that analogy about the foreign language, I think if anybody's ever taken a trip somewhere where people don't speak the language that you speak, you might employ a guide. You might get a book. I mean, there's any number of resources that you might look at. A patient advocate can be a very important one if you don't feel really comfortable trying to navigate that system on your own.
And this is a relationship with an advocate that can be done by telephone? Or
Absolutely.
Is it in person as well?
It can be both. A lot of that is patient preference. Joann and I worked strictly telephonically. We
Wow.
never met.
That's
We did
great.
do a Skype visit once to be able to see each other in real time, but it was easier for her if we could do things via the telephone.
Well, that's great. That is great information. Now, how do people get in touch with you, Cindy?
You can find me at my website, which is www.cindy.gatton.com, or by calling me directly at 404-687-6998.
Once again, great to have you on the show, Cindy. Cindy Gatton, patient advocate. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Gallops, and this is Doc Talk on Talk Radio 640 WGST.